Once, when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book called True Stories from Nature about the primeval forest. It was a picture of a boa constrictor in the act of swallowing an animal. Here is a copy of the drawing. In the book it said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing it. After that, they are not able to move and they sleep through the 6 months that they need for digestion. I pondered deeply then over the adventures of the jungle, and after some work with a colored pencil, I succeeded in making my first drawing, my drawing number 1. It looks something like this. I showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups and asked them whether the drawing frightened them, but they answered, "Frightened? Why should anyone be frightened by a hat?" My drawing was not a picture of a hat, it was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. But since the grown-up were not able to understand it, I made another drawing. I drew the inside of a boa constrictor so that the grown-ups could see it clearly. They always need to have things explained. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-up's response this time was to advise me to lay aside my drawings of boa constrictors, whether from the inside or the outside, and devote myself instead to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. That is why, at the age of 6, I gave up what might have been a magnificent career as a painter. I had been disheartened by the failure of my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2. Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them. So then I chose another profession and learned to pilot airplanes. I have flown a little over all parts of the world, and it is true that geography has been very useful to me. At a glance, I can distinguish China from Arizona. If one gets lost in the night, such knowledge is valuable. In the course of this life, I've had a great many encounters with a great many people who have been concerned with matters of consequence. I have lived a great deal among grown-ups. I have seen them intimately, close at hand, and that has not much improved my opinion of them. Whenever I met one of them who seemed to me at all clear-sighted, I tried the experiment of showing him my drawing number 1, which I have always kept. I will try to find out if this was a person of true understanding, but whoever it was, he or she will always say, "That is a hat." Then I will never talk to that person about boa constrictors of primeval forests or stars. I will bring myself down to his level. I will talk to him about bridge, golf, and politics, and neckties, and the grown-up will be greatly pleased to have met such a sensible man. So I lived my life alone, with anyone that I could really talk to, until I had an accident with my plane in the desert of Sahara 6 years ago. Something was broken in my engine, and as I had with me neither a mechanic nor any passengers, I set myself to attempt the difficult repairs all alone. It was a question of life or death to me. I had scarcely enough drinking water to last a week. The first night then, I went to sleep on the sand, 1,000 miles from any human habitation. I was more isolated than a shipwrecked sailor on a raft in the middle of the ocean. Thus, you can imagine my amazement at sunrise when I was awakened by an odd little voice. It said, "If you please, draw me a sheep." What? Draw me a sheep? I jumped to my feet, completely thunderstruck. I blinked my eyes hard. I carefully looked all around me, and I saw a most extraordinary small person who stood there examining me with great seriousness. Here you may see the best portrait that later I was able to make of him, but my drawing is certainly very much less charming than its model. That, however, is not my fault. The grown-ups discouraged me in my painter's career when I was 6 years old, and I never learned to draw anything except boas from the outside and boas from the inside. Now I stare at the sudden apparition with my eyes fairly staring out of my head in astonishment. Remember, I had crashed in the desert 1,000 miles from any inhabited region, and yet my little man seemed neither to be straying uncertainly among the sands, nor to be fainting from fatigue, or hunger, or thirst, or fear. Nothing about him gave any suggestions of a child lost in the middle of the desert, 1,000 miles from any human habitation. When at last I was able to speak, I said to him, "But what are you doing here?" And in answer, he repeated very slowly, as if he were speaking of a matter of great consequence, "If you please, draw me a sheep." When a mystery is too overpowering, wonder not to disobey, absurd as it may seem to me, 1,000 miles from any human habitation and in danger of death. I took out of my pocket a sheet of paper and my fountain pen. But then I remembered how my studies had been concentrated on geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar, and I told the little fellow, a little crossly too, that I did not know how to draw. He answered me, "That doesn't matter, draw me a sheep." But I had never drawn a sheep, so I drew for him one of the two pictures I have drawn so often. It was that of the boa constrictor from the outside. And I was astounded to hear the little fellow greeted with, No, I don't want an elephant inside of a boa constrictor. A boa constrictor is a very dangerous creature, and an elephant is very cumbersome. When I live, everything is very small. What I need is a sheep. Draw me a sheep." So then I made a drawing. He looked at it carefully. Then he said, "No, this sheep is already very sickly. Make me another." So I made another drawing. My friend smiled gently and indulgently. "You see yourself," he said. "This is not a sheep. This is a ram. It has horns." So then I did my drawing over once more, but it was rejected too, just like the others. "This one is too old. I want a sheep that will live a long time." By this time, my patience was exhausted because I was in a hurry to start taking my engine apart. So I tossed off this drawing and I threw out an explanation with it. "This is only his box. The sheep you asked for is inside." I was very surprised to see a light break over the face of my young Josh. "That is exactly the way I wanted it. Do you think that this sheep will have to have a great deal of grass?" "Why?" "Because where I live everything is very small. There will surely be enough grass for him," I said. "This is a very small sheep that I have given you." He bent his head over the drawing. "Not so small that, look, he has gone to sleep." And that is how I made the acquaintance of the little prince. It took me a long time to learn where he came from, the little prince, who asked me so many questions, never seemed to hear the ones I asked him. It was from words dropped by chance that little by little everything was revealed to me. The first time he saw my airplane, for instance, "I shall not draw my airplane, that will be too much complicated for me." He asked me, "What is that object?" "That is not an object, it flies. It is an airplane. It is my airplane." And I was proud to have him learn that I could fly. He cried out then, "What? You dropped down from the sky?" "Yes," I answered modestly. "Oh, that is funny." And the little prince broke into a lovely peal of laughter, which irritated me very much. I like my misfortunes to be taken seriously. Then he added, "So you two come from the sky? Which is your planet?" At that moment, I caught a gleam of light in the impenetrable mystery of his presence, and I demanded abruptly, "Do you come from another planet?" But he did not reply. He tossed his head gently without taking his eyes from my plane. "It is true that on that you can have come from very far away." And he sucked into a reverie, which lasted a long time. Then, taking my chip out of his pocket, he buried himself in the contemplation of his treasure. You can imagine how my curiosity was aroused by this half-confidence about the other planets. I made a great effort, therefore, to find out more on this subject. "My little man, where do you come from? What is this where I live, of which you speak? Where do you want to take your sheep?" After a reflective silence, he answered, The thing that is so good about the box you have given me is that at night he can use it as his house. That is so, and if you are good, I will give you a string too, so that you can tie him during the day, and a post to tie him to. But the little prince seemed shocked by this offer. Tie him? What a strange thing to do. But if you don't tie him, I said, he will wander off somewhere and get lost. My friend broke into another peal of laughter. But where do you think he will go? Anywhere, straight ahead of him. Then the little prince said earnestly, That doesn't matter. Where I live, everything is so small. And with perhaps a hint of sadness, he added, Straight ahead of him, nobody can go very far.